It's all just beginning. Please correct your posture when the system killed me. Liu Ruyan tended to the ailing Song Cheng, who suffered from a fever until he recovered the next day. Liu Ruyan suddenly remembered that I was still locked in the damp basement. Was being my lover such a bad fate? He asked the butler about my condition, but he only answered in a trembling voice. Mr. Fu is dead, Liu Ruyan, don't go. I warn him against making any rash moves because Liu Ruyan is a gentle and kind person at heart. He grew up next to this man, they were inseparable since childhood. Liu Ruyan is truly attached to him. He always naively thought this man reciprocated his feelings, but fate decreed otherwise, and when a rival appeared and fell into the river, everything collapsed. Liu Ruyan will not be able to bear this blow and will not be able to hurt his teacher. All the pent-up hatred and pain spills out into him. With each passing day, his character grows darker and more insane. 7 years ago, I found myself on the pages of this book. I was made responsible for winning Liu Ruyan's heart. I had to make him love me. To fulfill this mission, I tried my best to be there and comfort him. I helped him cope with the pain of losing the teacher he mourned so much, sincerely hoping that in time he would reciprocate my feelings. Today was the final stage of my conquest of Liu Ruyan. He was almost ready to abandon his teacher, but the latter unexpectedly sent a message to his rival. Liu Ruyan sent me this message by mistake. I was unbearably hurt and I regretted it so bitterly. Despite everything, he still rushed to his master. No matter how much I begged him to stay, he remained deaf and indifferent. Surrender, let him go. There was no emotion in Liu Ruyan's cold voice. Don't forget that you are just a replacement. You're not worth a dime compared to Song Cheng, but since you promised me, you will still love me, I whispered, but Liu Ruyan rudely pushed me away, cutting me off mid-sentence. Know your place. After saying a cruel goodbye, I'll leave when I cool down and I don't care about you. Liu Ruyan headed for the exit. I burst into a scream and then rushed towards him again, hugging him in complete despair, completely trampling my pride and dignity. Please don't go. If you go, you'll die. Liu Ruyan only gave me a cold, sarcastic laugh in response. He muttered through clenched teeth, rebirth, what nonsense. You threaten to kill yourself every time I leave. Are you even controlling me with such threats? Liu Ruyan flatly refused to listen to any of my explanations. You're just wasting my time. You're handsome, but stop using cheap manipulation. Trying to restrain him, I grabbed him with a death grip. Realizing that there was no way to talk him out of it, he ordered the guards, tie him up. Liu Ruyan coldly ordered me to be thrown into the basement so that I could finally come to my senses and reflect on my behavior. Who does he even think he is? I was roughly tied up by the maid from the villa. I watched Liu Ruyan disappear into the distance, my eyes wide with shock. The basement greeted me with impenetrable darkness. It was in this basement that Liu Ruyan usually locked himself up whenever he became seriously ill due to his obsession with his teacher. When the longing for his teacher became unbearable, he locked himself in order to restrain himself and not to break down on him with his fists. He locked himself within 4 walls, suffering from madness and despair, every time at such moments. I always stayed by his side to protect him. I let him take out his pain on me just so he wouldn't do anything stupid. Let all this cruelty fall on me alone, but every time the attack subsided, I felt half dead. I spent 7 whole years with him. Everyone says that in 7 years a person completely changes, erasing old habits. So it was time to forget about this man. 7 years is more than enough. Suddenly, I laughed quietly. The laughter was bitter and sad. Meanwhile, the mistress of the house, Liu Ruyan, had already arrived to take her feverish lover to the hospital. My mission had completely failed. You will lose your life for failure. The system's warning voice rang out in my head. I merely replied wearily. 2 hours left, perhaps there's still hope. The system reassured me, informing me that if Liu Ruyan returned to me within 2 hours, everything could be fixed. No, this is not a mission failure. I shook my head, abandoning my illusions. There's no point in clinging. Liu Ruyan will always belong to Song Cheng. No matter how hard I try, I won't melt his icy heart. I won't torture myself any longer. The clock hands struck midnight. My soul left the body of its original owner, no longer expecting anything. I thought I would be lost to oblivion after that. After all, every agent sent is in some sense like a messenger from the gods, and the system gave us a chance for salvation. But there would be no second chance. My soul floated freely in the air, never dissolving into space. Such was the punishment for failing to complete the task. My soul was doomed to wander this world forever as long as the one I tried to conquer lived. The system recorded my state. I'm reporting the host details you're leaving. The next carrier is already waiting for you, the system reported before shutting down. But I remained a free soul. No longer subordinate to anyone, I flew swiftly to the hospital and entered the ward. I saw Liu Ruyan again. His deep, pain-filled eyes had been fixed on the comatose Song Cheng all night. He sat constantly next to him, not even daring to close his eyes. He was afraid that if he blinked, Song Cheng would be gone, and he was afraid he would never see him so alive again. When Song Cheng came to, I noticed Liu Ruyan's slight surprise. "Why are you here? You sent me the message yourself." Song Cheng was taken aback, but then he realized I'd sent the message to the wrong person and sent it to Zia Liuliu. I saw Liu Ruyan's face darken with disappointment. However, he didn't get angry but only smiled touchedly. "I'll help you contact him, thank you." Liu Ruyan dialed Zia Liuliu's number, but at that very moment, Song Cheng himself called him, and Liu Ruyan froze in surprise. He always felt shy in front of the main character, being extremely cautious and trying to appear completely healthy. "You should live a normal life with him," Song Cheng said with a slight smile, and Liu Ruyan nodded obediently. But I could clearly see from his pain-filled eyes that I was fine, but Song Cheng was not. He simply desperately didn't want to shift his psychological problems onto him. Returning to the villa after being discharged, Liu Ruyan was immersed in the oppressive, silky silence of the empty rooms. He sat on the sofa for a long time, and the meeting with Song Cheng even seemed to lift his spirits, at least until noon. The housekeeper timidly offered him lunch, and he asked absently, "Is it a mistake to go back to him?" And then the housekeeper timidly replied, "Mr. Fu is still in the basement. He's not begging for mercy or causing a scene. Liu Ruyan, he's not." "Mr. Fu is being very quiet," the housekeeper bowed her head respectfully. "Miss, should I call Mr. Fu?" "No need." Liu Ruyan's voice was icy. "We'll see how long he lasts." The housekeeper didn't dare argue. I could only bitterly admit I had no pride left in front of him. When the system first chose me to be the aggressor. When I stepped into this book, I was fully aware of my status and understood that if I failed to conquer Liu Ruyan, then I'll die again, and a person who's already been through death becomes much more cautious. That's why, trying to get closer to him, I slightly altered the appearance of the body's previous owner, making myself look like that man, and then deliberately adapted to his roots. I spent hundreds of days at Liu Ruyan's side, sharing his habits. In truth, in the original story, no such character as me existed at all. In this world, I am completely alone, and it would be more accurate to say not that I was trying to capture Liu Ruyan, but that I was desperately drawn to him. Longing for a new chance at life, I hoped to be born again and finally start a real family. I wanted to learn to truly love myself. In my past life, I was incredibly lonely, so I gave this man my whole heart. I loved Liu Ruyan despite everything, despite his contempt and cruelty, even when he made mistakes. Even though it hurt me, in the end I always chose forgiveness. And even now, I'm not sure if I had any selfish motive in that love. At times, I almost forgot I was doing someone else's job until the system sent another warning. Seeing him rush off to that man again felt like a knife had been stabbed into my heart. I watched Liu Ruyan, always elegant, sit silently at the dinner table. Deep down, I didn't even want to be angry. I'd be gone soon anyway. I was just pretending nothing had happened when I suddenly remembered how, 6 months ago, that man and I had fallen into the water together from a yacht. According to the book's plot, there were ill-wishers among the characters who would use any dirty trick to frame the hero. When the main character was deliberately pushed into the sea, I rushed to his aid, but no one paid attention and we both ended up overboard. According to the script, the owner could do everything except swim, and incidentally, I couldn't swim either. When the heroine and Liu Ruyan noticed this, they jumped into the water first. Declaring they weren't afraid for their lives, they swam straight toward the man, moving further and further away from me with every passing second. At that moment, I was sure I was dying, but miraculously, a rescuer pulled me out. After a long coma, it took me a while to come to, and then, for the first time, I noticed a hint of guilt in Liu Ruyan's eyes. Even though he didn't say anything out loud, I didn't hold a grudge. He'd been kind to me all these long months, after all. If it hadn't been for that unfortunate miscommunication, our relationship might have continued to improve. With a heavy heart, I suddenly wondered, what expression would Liu Ruyan have when he saw my lifeless body? Probably completely indifferent. The villa was plunged into absolute silence at night. At night, Liu Ruyan usually worked in his office, spending increasingly more time there after his breakup with the protagonist, which had noticeably changed his usual routine. Events unfolded rapidly. He silently tapped the keys, then stood up abruptly and stood frozen by the window. The street was pitch black. Staring into the darkness for a long moment, Liu Ruyan took out a cigarette and lit it. His addiction had become another way for him to numb the pain. Smoking was a necessity, a way to get the teacher out of my head. I'd been around him too long, studying every nuance of his emotions, and now I could easily read his feelings even in the slightest movement of his eyebrows. Now he irritated me more than usual, the effect of his recent encounter with the teacher, which had once again brought the storm within him to its surface. After smoking one cigarette, he immediately reached for a second when suddenly the door swung open. "Miss, come in." The butler brought in a tray with a cup of hot milk and a pastry. "Have some, miss." The butler's caustic questions went unanswered. "Mr. Fu isn't in the basement. I just remembered that he faithfully baked for you every night, so I decided to bring it to you." A flicker of movement flickered in Liu Ruyan's eyes. "Mistress, Mr. Fu baked this wedding cake the day before yesterday. He struggled with it for a long time, but finally finished it in one night." "Try it yourself," Liu Ruyan said, not even glancing at the treat. "I'm just passing on what Master Fu told me to pass on." "Very well," the butler said, silently placing the milk and cake on the table. And then he took them back. As he left, he couldn't bear it any longer. "Madam, Mr. Fu has been sitting in the basement for almost 2 days without food or water. I'm so worried about him." "It's his own choice. He deserves to starve to death for being so stubborn," Liu Ruyan snapped angrily. "Since he's decided to play games with me, I'll see what kind of stuff he's made of." After uttering many more harsh words, he snapped, "No one is to go down to the basement without my permission." The butler nodded, but inwardly he was seething with anger at Liu Ruyan, though he didn't dare object and silently left. Alone, Liu Ruyan carefully wiped away the ash that had fallen to the floor and returned to his computer. He continued working with the same composure, not even considering for a second whether I was still alive or not. And should I have expected anything from him? After my death, he would react with the same indifference. The night grew darker, but Liu Ruyan clearly had no intention of sleeping. I was suddenly so infuriated by his stubbornness that I started tugging at my hair, trying to pull out the hairpin, but it was stuck fast. Previously, as part of my duties, I accompanied him everywhere during filming. In the evenings, I'd pick out his wardrobe for the next day. In the mornings, I'd help him wash and dress, and sometimes I'd braid his hair. For those 7 years, he was completely helpless in everyday life. He'd barely managed to live independently, but now he was managing. His scalp was aching with anger, and the hairpin wouldn't budge, so he angrily kicked a nearby chair. There was a loud bang, and at that very moment, the phone rang sharply. "Hello, this is Song Cheng," came the protagonist's voice on the other end of the line. As soon as Liu Ruyan heard it, his recent irritation instantly evaporated and his face softened. Around this man, Liu Ruyan had never felt pride. He took out all his pent-up anger and resentment exclusively on me, whereas in front of Song Cheng, even after all the betrayals, he silently endured any humiliation. At any time of day or night, whenever this man beckoned to him, he would rush at the first call, even if it meant certain death. "Did something happen?" Song Cheng asked anxiously. "No," Liu Ruyan replied quietly, instantly composing himself and changing the subject. "You're so late. Is something wrong?" Without waiting for the man to answer, he immediately bombarded him with questions. "How are you feeling? Has your temperature risen again?" "I'm just calling to say the doctor discharged me. It's nothing serious, just a slight cold and a little fatigue. It'll all be over in a couple of days. Take care of yourself and stay healthy." "Okay, thank you," Song Cheng replied, adding, "It's a shame you were in such a hurry to leave today and we didn't get to talk properly." Liu Ruyan gripped the phone tightly, saying nothing. In fact, he left so hastily only because he was afraid to be around and cause unnecessary trouble. He would rather swallow any pain than take it out on his lover. Meanwhile, Song Cheng remembered something else. "By the way, Luo asked me to tell you, tomorrow is my birthday. I'd like you to come." Liu Ruyan's fingers gripped the phone tightly. "I wasn't actually planning on throwing a party, but Luo insisted. Are you free?" "Yes," Liu Ruyan breathed out quietly. "Great, just remember to bring Fasheng with you. Last time, she nearly drowned saving him, and I never got the chance to thank her." "Okay," Liu Ruyan hesitated for a second, but finally agreed. How could he refuse this man, even knowing how badly he'd been wounded? "It's late, get some rest, see you tomorrow." Liu Ruyan slowly lowered the phone, but his gaze remained glued to the screen displaying Song Cheng's call history. Truth be told, he should have given up long ago. As soon as Liu Ruyan heard this man's name, he lost his mind, overwhelmed by blind love. All these 7 years. What was I to him anyway? I'd watched him for so long, but it was all in vain. The phone screen went blank. He stood up abruptly, flung open the office door, and shouted loudly, "Uncle Wang!" The housekeeper and servants immediately ran out of the rooms, their heads raised. "I'm here, miss. Go and tell Fu Shen if he's realized his mistake. Let him stop being jealous and acting crazy after his illness. You can let him go." The housekeeper nodded with relief, and I only laughed bitterly into the void. Liu Ruyan, I can't remain silent any longer. I can't come to the library anymore after all the harm he's done to me. All I had left was one line and a cold body. Liu Ruyan returned to the office, where the protagonist called him again on the phone. Now he looked completely calm, his movements smooth, and his mood visibly improved. At that moment, the butler knocked timidly on the door, and I noticed genuine horror in his eyes. I was even overcome with fear. Had he really realized I was dead? "Mistress." The butler hesitated, choosing childish, awkward words as if unsure how to deliver the news. "Is Fu Shen still sulking?" Liu Ruyan interrupted without a shadow of a doubt. Liu Ruyan's voice was cold and his gaze was utterly false. "No, madam, just tell Fu Shen if he continues this act, I wouldn't care a bit, even if he starved to death in this basement." The butler's entire body trembled at these words. But Mr. Fu really was dead. For a second, a hint of genuine panic flashed in Liu Ruyan's eyes, but it was quickly replaced by furious hatred. What other tricks has he come up with? Does he think feigning death will soften my heart and force me to compromise? "Miss, he really is dead. I was just going down there." Mr. Fu's body was cold and rigid. The butler repeated with a mixture of delight and horror, noticing Liu Ruyan's heavy gaze boring into him. "This is nonsense," Liu Ruyan snapped. "It's the absolute truth," the butler persisted. Then Liu Ruyan rose abruptly from the table and strode resolutely toward the exit, the butler hurrying after him. We quickly descended into the semi-darkness of the dank basement. Standing by the open door, I looked down at my lifeless body, sprawled on the floor and still bound with ropes. Even in death, I was forced to follow Liu Ruyan everywhere. For the first time, assessing my posthumous appearance from a distance, I thought I looked as if I'd simply fallen fast asleep. "Stop playing around, I know you're alive." Liu Ruyan's voice still dripped with icy contempt. "I'll count to 3, get up yourself." Remembering yesterday, I smiled bitterly. Until the very end, he'd been convinced I was simply manipulating him, putting on a cheap show for attention. He sincerely believed that if he showed firmness, I would crawl back to him like an obedient little dog, wagging my tail. 1, 2. Liu Ruyan's voice grew suffocatingly furious, but noticing that I still hadn't moved, he gritted his teeth. "Fu Shen, don't be so shameless." But how could a dead body react to his threats? Liu Ruyan's eyes turned red with impotent rage. It was pure rage, ignited by the fact that for the first time in my life I dared to go against his wishes. Mr. Fu, really?" The butler tried to intervene, but was abruptly cut off. "Tell him if he doesn't get out of here this evening, he may as well never leave." Throwing this out as he went, Liu Ruyan turned and left. That heartless man didn't even dare come closer. To see with my own eyes whether I was alive or dead. My soul obediently followed Liu Ruyan upstairs, watching him return to the bedroom. He seemed to be desperately trying to push away the terrifying thoughts. He shook for a moment, but quickly regained his composure, threw me aside, and headed for the bathroom to wash away the pent-up tension. "Yujing!" he shouted into the void after his shower, waiting a few seconds in hopes of the usual response. But the answer was silence. Throwing off his towel, he pulled on his pajamas, collapsed onto the bed, turned off the light, and instantly fell asleep. And somewhere under the floor, my lifeless body still lingered. He couldn't care less whether I lived or died. The thought didn't even disturb his sleep. The next morning, the alarm blared. Out of habit, no one rushed to turn it off. Exhausted from work, Liu Ruyan switched off his nap mode for another 10 minutes until the piercing ringing resumed with renewed vigor. "Fu Shen, are you deaf?" he muttered sleepily. Half asleep, Liu Ruyan irritably blurted out into the void, "Yes, I understand. I'm getting up. I'm getting up." But the alarm clock didn't stop ringing. Finally, he abruptly turned his head toward my side of the bed. And his gaze fell upon the completely empty, tucked-in sheets. Memories of yesterday fell upon him like a heavy weight. Biting his lip painfully, he jerked the blanket aside, stood up, and trudged into the bathroom, then disappeared into the walk-in closet, where he remained stuck among the hangers for a long time. He spent a long time meticulously choosing his outfit. He was attending the protagonist's birthday party, so he had to look impeccable. Liu Ruyan wasn't a classic, striking beauty, but his flawless figure, milky skin, and innate elegance made him irresistible at first glance. Dressed in a formal black dress, he paused in front of a full-length mirror. He stared critically at his reflection for several minutes, clearly dissatisfied. Adjusting the elegant belt at his waist, he winced, tore off his dress, and began sorting through his clothes again, before setting about applying flawless makeup. Descending to the first floor, he encountered the housekeeper waiting for him at the foot of the stairs. "Miss, what about Mr. Fu? Are you still going alone?" she asked anxiously. "That's Fushin's problem, don't worry about it. Since he's decided to die, let him go," Liu Ruyan said coldly, heading for the dining table. Leaving the housekeeper no room for argument, he ate breakfast in silence. The poor woman merely sighed heavily, not daring to argue any further. Having finished his meal, Liu Ruyan left the villa, my disembodied soul following relentlessly behind. First, he stopped at the office, where he immersed himself in a never-ending series of work tasks. He worked until a phone call pulled him out of his routine. "Liu Ruyan, are you on your way yet?" The protagonist's reproachful voice came over the line. She remembered her promise to attend the celebration. He was a man who never forgot Song Cheng's affairs. "I'm on my way, sorry I'm late," he replied apologetically. Having dropped the challenge, Liu Ruyan took off and raced to the party, blindly breaking every rule along the way, though he'd long since lost all fear of death. Reaching the lavishly decorated hall, where there was no room to swing a cat, he immediately caught the attention of the birthday boy, who immediately walked toward him arm in arm with his companion. "Ruyan, you've finally come." "Sorry I'm late, this is for you." Liu Ruyan handed over a holiday gift he'd thoughtfully grabbed from the car. Every year, I helped him choose the perfect gift for Song Cheng, knowing the protagonist's tastes intimately, and this long-standing habit had become second nature to me. Opening the elegant box, Song Cheng was practically beaming with happiness. Inside lay the rarest artifact the birthday boy had dreamed of for so long. His eyes widened in amazement. He exclaimed, "Ruyan, where did this come from? I heard this rare piece of precious wood was put up for auction, but it was snatched up in an instant. I didn't expect you to have it. Do you still remember my whims?" "Thank you, Ruyan. You're the only one who understands me at a glance." Looking into Liu Ruyan's face, I tried in vain to discern the true feelings behind the momentary tenderness. In fact, this entire complex gift had been prepared from start to finish by me, Fu Shen. "By the way, why didn't Fu Shen come with you?" the man suddenly asked. The question caught Liu Ruyan off guard. A heavy silence fell for a few seconds. "What's wrong with you two fighting?" Song Cheng asked, genuinely worried about me. "Fu Shen is always so kind to you, so have you been sad with him again?" Liu Ruyan remained unusually silent, making no attempt to laugh it off. "Come on, Ruyan, Fu Shen is a man of gold. You won't find anyone better than him. If you lose him, you'll regret it for the rest of your life," the protagonist said, unexpectedly serious. Possessing ample resources and forever indebted to my kind-heartedness, Song Cheng genuinely pitied me. He always openly advocated for Liu Ruyan and me to marry. There's probably no other man in the entire universe who would accept a rival's insane devotion with such cynical composure, despite knowing absolutely everything about him. "Ruyan, how can you have the decency to walk all over a man who loves you to the point of self-forgetfulness and tolerates your constant quirks?" the birthday boy snapped irritably. "You don't even bother to reciprocate his feelings, so how much longer can you continue to torment his patience?" Song Cheng continued to scold him. "Yes, years of obediently serving Liu Ruyan's every whim have taken their toll, turning me into a blind servant. I'd grown accustomed to losing myself in him, paying off other people's debts and doing everything for his smile." "Ruyan, stop deceiving yourself," added the host. "Don't burn your bridges completely. Once you lose Fu Shen, you'll howl with grief. He, more than anyone, deserves humane treatment." With these words, Song Cheng handed back the marble bead, returning it to its gift box with the words, "This is a beautiful thing, thank you for your devotion, but it should rightfully belong to Fu Shen." Liu Ruyan stared silently at the Buddha bead in his hand, not saying a word. "By the way, I've prepared something for him too. Give it to him personally," the man said, picking up a small box from the table and opening it. Inside was the very same modest tie I'd persuaded Liu Ruyan to choose with me the day before. Although it cost mere pennies and was way out of my price range, Liu Ruyan eyed the golden silk with a strange expression. Frankly, he didn't like the style at all. It was just that this tie perfectly matched Liu Ruyan's own tie pin, and I so wanted a matching accessory. Ever since I was assigned this role, all my possessions, thoughts, and desires had been inextricably tied to him. No trace of my own self remained. "Fu Shen didn't ask you to buy this for him, did he?" Song Cheng asked, narrowing his eyes. Liu Ruyan's body tensed and he nodded nervously. "You've lived under the same roof with him for so many years, but have you ever spoiled him with gifts? You're always dressed to the nines, but you're always stingy with Fu Shen." The more the man talked, the more disgusted I became. I might not have earned millions, but I was his partner, not his servant. How could he have displayed such a demonstrative, disregardful attitude for years? How could he have calmly watched me languish in poverty and endless humiliation? But Liu Ruyan merely replied dryly, "He never asked me for anything." And he was right, I truly did ask nothing in return. Even now, dying in a damp basement, I wasn't angry. He simply didn't see fit to come to me. This realization made me love him even more, though that love had long since become my curse. Loving so blindly and selflessly is a disease, Ruyan. Fasheng is a living person. He, too, has a heart that can actually ache. Noticing Liu Ruyan's fingers trembling nervously on the rim of his glass with barely concealed hatred, Song Cheng sighed, "Listen to me, go home and apologize to him properly." The party was in full swing, but the atmosphere had been ruined. Standing to the side, I thought with a bitter smile, where would he go? Seeing this man alive would be a luxury, but leaving him for someone else, especially for a man who was essentially a stranger to him, was beyond his strength. However, under Song Cheng's heavy, reproachful gaze, radiating a strange mixture of hatred and attraction, Liu Ruyan broke. "Fine, I'll go," he quietly forced out, terrified of displeasing the protagonist, whom he had never been able to refuse. Having said goodbye to everyone, Liu Ruyan left the party. He got behind the wheel of his own car and remained motionless for a long time, a warring tension between pride and a deep longing that whispered to him to return to the noisy crowd. Finally, with a heavy sigh, he started the engine and trudged home. The road dragged on endlessly slowly, reflecting the inner chaos of his soul, so unlike his usual icy composure. Finally, the black gates of the villa opened. As soon as he crossed the threshold, he froze, noticing several frightened servants in the hall, whispering something near the stairs. "What's going on here?" Liu Ruyan barked irritably, not expecting to see anyone so early. He'd figured the entire evening would be spent on polite conversation with Song Cheng. A pale butler burst out from the depths of the corridor. "Miss, this is Master Fu's body." "What, is the show still going on?" Liu Ruyan interrupted angrily, thinking I was still playing the fool. "Where's Fasheng?" he called out as he walked, heading straight for the basement. "Downstairs," the butler managed to say in a shaky voice. This time, Liu Ruyan didn't pause at the threshold. He strode decisively inside, instantly noticing that the heavy ropes around my body had already been untied by the servants' caring hands. After all, I was dead, and keeping the corpse bound was pointless. My soul hovered just above it, silently watching Liu Ruyan stare at my waxen face and frozen hands. "Fasheng," he called coldly, not raising his voice. "I repeat for the last time, get up yourself. I'm not going to pull you up for you." He still thought I was just messing around, trying to get his attention. Did he really think a dead man could rise at the snap of his fingers? Was this another elaborate threat, or had he simply lost his mind? Was I really supposed to indulge his whims even in the afterlife? Liu Ruyan's voice echoed throughout the empty basement, causing the butler to hunker down. "Miss, please understand, Master Fu really is dead," he squeaked softly, unable to contain himself. "Don't talk nonsense, people don't just die." Liu Ruyan cut him off furiously, though his own voice was already tinged with panic. The butler lowered his eyes heavily, unsure of what to say. He himself couldn't quite believe what was happening. After all, I was tied up, I couldn't have killed myself, and there were no signs of violence on my body. "Fasheng, are you really going to carry out this farce to the end?" Liu Ruyan leaned over me, peering into the void. "Yes, I want to marry you," my soul, soaring upward, quietly replied. Once upon a time, at the height of my frantic courtship, Liu Ruyan jokingly tossed me this phrase, and I was ready to give him the world. Remembering it, I smiled bitterly. "Liu Ruyan, let's get married." This ghostly echo of the past momentarily froze the air around us. "Don't be ridiculous, Fasheng, you promised to learn to love me for real," he muttered under his breath, as if trying to justify himself. I remembered that evening clearly. He came home dead drunk. I carefully washed his body, gave him honey water to drink, and put him to bed. Then he suddenly pressed his cheek to mine and in a drunken, broken voice whispered, "Fasheng, you know, I've decided to try to love you." I spent days replaying these words in my head, naively believing in a miracle, but the next morning he coldly said, "I don't like you at all." My heart literally burst with pain, and my lungs filled with icy water. After that incident, Liu Ruyan closed himself off from me for a long time like an icy wall. I didn't dare remind him of that promise again. "Fasheng, congratulations, you've won. I agree to marry you, just stop this circus," Liu Ruyan said, and at that moment I couldn't contain my nervous, ringing laughter. He was seriously proposing marriage, right in front of my dead body. There were no emotions left inside me, only a dull numbness and a bitter understanding of the absurdity of what was happening. "Get up, stop acting." His voice suddenly softened, taking on an almost gentle tone. "Do you hear me? Tomorrow we're going to pick out wedding rings. Go and choose a wedding dress. You yourself begged me to give it to Buddha, but I took it back. On the appointed day you will wear it at our wedding, and believe me, it is truly priceless. Song Cheng also sent you a tie, assuring you it's just right for your taste. Which suit will you like? A watch, cufflinks, a tie, and shoes from the limited edition. I can afford them anytime." She said so many things to my lifeless body as if I weren't dead at all, but simply playing a cruel game, and now she's trying to make me feel guilty. It's truly surreal. She treated me with such disdain. Is she really capable of feeling regret now? Although perhaps she's simply indifferent, or I'm just overthinking it. It seems I was just a way for her to satisfy a fleeting whim. Madam, the butler can't bear this anymore. He insists that Master Fu is truly dead and there will be no wedding, the servant began timidly. Shut up, Liu Ruyan snapped. Her eyes turned red with rage and all her anger spilled out onto the poor old man, who immediately retreated. Fu Sheng couldn't die, he simply has no right to, Liu Ruyan insisted stubbornly. We're not even married and he hasn't yet gone through all the trials, so how could he give up? The butler didn't dare object but silently handed her a worn notebook. Liu Ruyan's gaze flickered. What is this? Mr. Fu's personal diary. While sorting through Master Fu's things today, I stumbled upon these notes, the butler explained. Like a lost sheep, I often felt lonely and homesick. To numb the pain and keep myself afloat, I began writing down my thoughts. I stood next to her watching her, but my body was motionless. She opened my diary with trembling hands. April 4, 2016. Today I found myself on the pages of this book. The system warns me that I have been chosen as a pawn in someone else's game. If I succeed in this task, I will have a chance at a new life. If I fail, I will face final death. April 10, 2016. I saw the target of my mission for the first time. He looked utterly miserable, and in his eyes there was only an all-consuming loneliness, as if there was no one left in the world except him. This sight suddenly pierced my heart, reminding me of my own past. I too had always been lonely. On my birthday, my father dropped by to visit us briefly, and on the way back he was hit by a truck. My relatives immediately blamed me, and my mother hated me with all her heart. My grandmother raised me. My grandmother was my only guardian angel, but when I was in second grade, she was fatally struck by a car and my world collapsed completely. Even as I was leaving, I clutched her favorite potato shashlik in my hand. After her death, everyone around me insisted I was cursed and brought only misfortune. Because of my age, I was dragged through the ranks. My mother had to take me in after she got married. Her new husband had a son 5 years older than me, and they later had a daughter together. The little girl got all the family's attention, and no one noticed how my stepbrother constantly bullied me. When I tried to tell my mother about it, the worst happened. My mother slapped me across the face, saying, "You're a man. Do you think you can make me feel sorry for you? She'll show you what it's like to be a man. Do you even know how much effort it took to raise you?" I realized there was no point in complaining. Even when I was being bullied, I had to endure all the humiliation silently so as not to incur her wrath. I endured this hell until I entered college, hoping to finally escape. But soon after graduation, my sister reappeared in my life, a real fury. She threw money at me but continued to stalk me. After 2 years of torment, I broke down and in a fit of despair embraced her. Our mistake was noticed and my mother found out about it. The first thing she did was humiliate me again with the worst possible words, accusing me of ingratitude and calling me a heartless bastard, and then forced me to turn myself in to the police. Feeling completely crushed and useless, I climbed up to the roof and stepped down. I don't want to remember that nightmare anymore. Every memory resonates with a wild fear, as if I were reliving death. Today begins my final chapter. With this woman named Liu Ruyan, I will try to build a life from scratch. Will she accept me? On April 16, 2016, I decided to have plastic surgery. The system was generous with its funds, allocating a sizable sum on the day of my arrival. I used it to transform my appearance to match Song Chang's. The recovery process was excruciatingly painful, but I regretted nothing, feeling reborn. On July 20, 2016, my facial features finally healed, and I resembled Song Chang by about 6 to 7%. That should be enough. I went to Liu Ruyan's company office and deliberately stepped in front of her car as it was leaving. The pain from the impact was unbearable, but meeting her terrified gaze, I knew I was doing the right thing. On July 30th, I was discharged from the hospital. I moved into her villa of my own free will and began living under the same roof. I knew all too well how deeply attached she was to Song Chang. She even tried to force him to take medication and take care of himself at the expense of her own health. I was touched by this devotion, and I believed that one day I could pull her out of this emotional trap. I hoped we would continue living together. April 4, 2017. A whole year of my stay in this world flew by, but I still couldn't melt Liu Ruyan's heart. She was still raving about Song Chang. October 3, 2017. Today is her birthday. I personally baked a cake for her and waited all night, but she never returned. It turned out she spent the night outside Song Chang's house, afraid to disturb his peace but wanting to be closer. April 4, 2018. 2 years have passed and her feelings for me have not changed. July 13, 2018. While Liu Ruyan was away working, earning a living, I looked after the house and made sure I ate regularly, even though my stomach often rebelled from the stress. I began cooking her favorite dishes, trying to surround her with care. Every time she ate my food, I felt a strange warmth and peace. It seemed like we were finally becoming a real family. I desperately wanted to be with her, not just to fulfill the system's mission, but because my heart called me to it. April 4, 2019. 3 years had passed. The system reminded me of my failure every day, but what could I do? I truly gave it my all. February 15, 2020. I realized I had fallen completely and irrevocably in love with Liu Ruyan. Seeing her gaze directed at Song Cheng was physically painful. Falling in love with her was too easy, as she became the only glimmer of light in my dark and miserable life. She gave me a chance at salvation, and I wanted to be her savior, curing her of the obsession of unrequited love. I dreamed of a warm house full of children. December 25, 2020, Christmas. It was snowing heavily. That day, Liu Ruyan kicked me out after Song Cheng had another tantrum, and she rushed to console him. My phone was left in her car, I had no money, and I had to walk home in the freezing cold. She was surprised to see me at the door, but she chose to maintain an icy expression. I remained silent, not blaming her for anything, because I understood the depth of her pain. Song Cheng only accepted Xia Liu's embrace, leaving Liu Ruyan with a broken heart. April 4, 2021. 5 years had passed. Should I have given up? But inside, everything still resisted. I wasn't so much afraid of death itself as of losing the chance to be with her. April 4, 2022. I hadn't touched my diary for a whole year, perhaps because I simply had nothing to add. It was already the 7th year and I still hadn't completed the task. June 19, 2022. Liu Ruyan got very drunk and suddenly promised to try her best to love me. Last summer, I finally felt a response in her soul. The system whispered that the goal was near. On October 13, 2022, I plunged into the raging sea, saving the heroine. Xia Liu and Liu Ruyan pulled me out, but I almost lost my life. When I came to after a long coma, I saw Liu Ruyan sitting next to me. We became a little closer, and I even forgot about her previous coldness and her refusal to marry me in March. I'd grown accustomed to her presence, and the system was counting down the last 15 days. If only Liu Ruyan would stop depending on Song Cheng, we could find the peace we've longed for and start a new life. I've been looking forward to this day and our shared future. The diary ended there. I glanced at Liu Ruyan and noticed large tears streaming down her cheeks. Had even a drop of remorse awakened within her? Strangely, I felt a complete emptiness inside. This would have broken my heart before, but now I felt only a dull weariness, as if I were looking at a complete stranger. Death truly does erase everything. More than anything, I wanted to disappear from Liu Ruyan's life forever and never return to this vicious cycle. "Madam, please come to your senses," the butler spoke again, allowing himself to shout for the first time in his years of service. "There are those in this house who are still alive. Get out of my sight," Liu Ruyan cut him off icily. Alone in the gloomy dungeon, she slowly knelt before my body. Her slender fingers hesitantly touched my face. She trembled all over, aware that she was touching cold flesh. The strangled sound that escaped her chest echoed off the stone walls of the basement, filling the space with unbearable melancholy. Late love is like weeds on a charred site. I watched her mindlessly from the sidelines while she sobbed inconsolably over my cooling body. I used to think that men only cried out of helplessness, but it turns out women can suffer just as much. When I was alive and desperately needed her warmth, she remained deaf. Now that I was gone, she called my name with such heartrending, frantic love, as if I were the center of her universe. "Wake up, I beg you," she whispered through her tears. "Let's get married right now. I'll arrange any ceremony you want. I'll forget the way to Song Cheng. I only need you. Fu Shen, don't leave me." Listening to her hysterical pleas, I couldn't shake the sense of absurdity that was happening. Of course, she felt guilty. After all, losing someone who's been by your side for years is hard, even if you're indifferent. But I never expected such a storm of emotion, bordering on madness, from her, because before, all her thoughts belonged exclusively to the main character. In that dank basement, she kept calling my name over and over again. From the outside, it seemed as if she herself had gone mad. I hovered like a disembodied shadow near the ceiling, watching as Liu Ruyan sat on the floor all night, ignoring even calls from Song Cheng. Early in the morning, the butler cautiously descended into the basement. "Madam, Mr. Fu's body isn't preserved. It will begin to decompose," he reminded her timidly. "I've seen it myself from the sidelines as my body gradually disintegrates." Liu Ruyan looked up at him with a crazed expression, continuing to kneel before the remains. "That's enough," she said hoarsely, suddenly calm. "I've mourned him all night. That's enough." She rose unsteadily to her feet, barely keeping her balance. The butler tried to support her, but she pushed his hand away and silently headed for the exit. "What do you order to be done about Master Fu's funeral, madam?" the servant called after her. "No funeral." "But then, what should we do with the body?" the butler asked, confused, receiving no answer to his questions as Liu Ruyan's figure disappeared behind the door. She returned to the office and immediately grabbed the phone. "Arrange the wedding immediately." "Whose wedding, madam, and with whom?" Chaya's assistant was taken aback. "With Fu Shen, arrange everything this very second," Liu Ruyan shrieked. She had just slammed the phone down in a rage at the villa, and now she was calling everyone, demanding their immediate presence at the wedding ceremony the next day. Everyone around her had clearly gone crazy. Soon, she dialed Song Cheng's number. "Song Cheng, I'm getting married tomorrow." "So suddenly?" he asked, surprised. "Has Fu Shen finally forgiven you? I told you he's a wonderful man, there was no point in tormenting him." Liu Ruyan merely said coldly, "But he's much better than you," and cut off the connection. She decided to have the wedding out of spite, calling nonstop. I silently left the villa, watching this madness from the sidelines. I watched as suits, rings, and wedding dresses were purchased, and then returned to the refrigeration room. Rubbing my glassy artificial eyes, I realized with horror, Liu Ruyan was actually planning to marry a dead man. Even in my wildest dreams, I couldn't have imagined this surreal farce with a crowd of invited guests the next day. She completely lost her mind, but no one canceled the ceremony. The first guests were already arriving at the villa, including a delighted Song Cheng. Dressed in a white wedding gown, he approached Liu Ruyan and asked reproachfully, "Where is the body? Why are you drinking all alone?" She merely shook her head, not noticing the coffin in a dark corner behind a lush flower vine. "Is Fu Shen here?" he asked, and Liu Ruyan nodded affirmatively. The man stepped forward, followed by Liu Ruyan and the entire crowd of guests. As they approached, the air seemed to freeze. Everyone around froze in shock when my lifeless body was revealed in the open coffin. "Ruyan, what does this mean?" someone from the crowd stammered, confused. "Fu Shen?" The man refused to believe his own eyes. Liu Ruyan coldly retorted that before my death I had never uttered the words I was accused of. The stunned man couldn't understand how such a sudden occurrence could have happened when just recently everything had seemed normal. The guests whispered in horror, "If I'm dead, why arrange this crazy wedding?" Liu Ruyan gave the critic such a ferocious glare that he instantly fell silent. Only one man retained a voice at this point. "Ruyan, why are you creating this nightmare?" he breathed. To which Liu Ruyan blurted out without a shadow of a doubt, "Fu Shen wants to marry me. The sight of him nearly makes me vomit blood. Didn't I have the right to want you to experience the same? I'm dead, I just want to finally find peace underground. I've had enough of these dirty games and show-offs," flashed through my mind. The man stood there for a long moment, speechless, and the other guests were afraid to even breathe. The ceremony continued in surreal silence, one living person and one lifeless body. The perplexed master of ceremonies turned to Liu Ruyan. "Miss Liu, would you agree to take Master Fu Shen as your husband, for richer or for poorer? In old age and even after death, I will love him and protect him until death do us part." "I agree," Liu Ruyan said firmly. After this, the host formally addressed my body with the same question. Liu Ruyan answered for me, "He agrees, but I don't. But don't you dare stop me from getting him back." She placed the ring on my numb finger and lightly touched my forehead with her lips, which made me physically sick. With that, the absurd ceremony came to an end. I naively believed this spectacle was over and that even as a ghost I could breathe freely. But at that moment, police officers burst through the villa's doors. The guests stirred in panic, and only Liu Ruyan maintained an icy calm, serenely watching the approaching guards. "Who called the police?" she asked coldly. "I committed murder," a tense voice rang out. I myself was completely confused. Who had they managed to kill? "Fu Shen," the man pointed to the officer standing nearby. The police immediately dispersed throughout the room, and the first thing they did was take us all to the station for questioning. Liu Ruyan had just left the wedding in front of a stunned crowd, and at the police station she unexpectedly confessed to my murder. Realizing the absurdity of the situation, I mentally grabbed my head and called the police myself. After examining the body, the forensic team found no signs of foul play, concluding that the cause was a simple heart attack. Thus, the murder charge against Liu Ruyan was dropped, but she faced prison time for unintentional consequences. In the end, I was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Metaphorically, my soul was supposed to follow her for all the suffering she'd caused. Did my ancestors really want to exact 8 times the debt from me? If you want to die with me, then commit suicide. Why this farce? Nevertheless, I spent the entire 7 years in prison for Liu Ruyan, watching her decline and experiencing every blow of fate alongside her. I naively thought she'd repent. After all, after my death, she'd given me a proper burial. Couldn't she just move on with her life? Instead, she dragged me into this hell. As soon as she was released, Liu Ruyan went straight to my cemetery and fell to her knees before my tombstone. She touched the black and white photograph on the monument with trembling fingers, whispering words of apology for her tardiness, assuring me that her remorse was sincere. At that moment, I thought my patience would snap and I would simply disappear. Liu Ruyan was overcome with ecstasy, but I no longer cared. "I came to keep you company and I'll never leave you again," she muttered, pulling a knife from her pocket. The blade slashed heavily across her wrist, splattering the slab with blood, but she no longer felt the pain. A pistol flashed in her hand. I hovered above, silently watching her every movement, understanding that after death, people lose the ability to feel fear. Watching her suicide from the sidelines, I felt like a spectator at a cheap show. The only flaw in the whole story was that I was stuck here, allowing her to desecrate my soul. But the voice of the system finally declared, "The target is dead, your soul is free." Now that Liu Ruyan had also perished, the circle was complete. Could I finally return to the familiar world? How long I've waited for this. Seeing Liu Ruyan's lifeless body on the ground, I felt my soul being sucked into a powerful vortex like a black hole. A familiar mechanical voice rang in my head. "Congratulations, you've successfully completed the mission and are returning home. See you soon." What next meeting? Was it really all going to happen again? More than anything, I wanted to erase this past from my memory forever. I felt completely innocent, like a man born again. When I came to, I stood with a clouded consciousness, looking at the blood on my wrists in front of my father's grave. I laughed nervously, realizing I'd finally followed him to the very end. Only now did I clearly understand how many mistakes I'd made in this life and how much I truly loved him. In his old diary, he called me his savior and the only meaning of his existence. He sincerely believed I was his only light, but in the end, it was I who ruined his life. I was supposed to have a long life, but I never expected that after 7 years in prison, I wouldn't want an easy death, but instead would continue to endlessly reproach myself, even calling the police in a fit of despair. I'd waited years for this moment to reunite with him on the other side. Upon my release, I immediately ran to his grave, gazing at the familiar features on the monument, and suddenly, desperately, I wanted to remember. What was he like in reality before that nightmare? It seemed to me that I should love him even more, accepting his true nature. Everything swam before my eyes, the chill of death gripped my body, but fear quickly gave way to a strange relief. My soul easily separated from my flesh, proving that the afterlife and the immortality of souls are a harsh reality. But where is the promised rebirth? I darted around the void like a lost fly until an entity called the system appeared before my eyes. "Congratulations, you've been chosen as a new hunter, a unique chance to start over. Become a hunter like Fu Shen." No way, I don't need that role. "I simply want to find his reincarnated soul. Where is it?" I demanded, flatly refusing any conditions. "He is no longer in this world, but you can travel to another dimension after him," the system retorted. "Fine, I'll agree to anything for this goal. But the condition remains the same. You must accept the role of the attacker." "Still refuse?" Before I could finish speaking, I agreed, and the next second my disembodied soul once again assumed its alien earthly form. The familiar and painfully boring scenario began to unfold anew. "Ready to attack the protagonist?" The system's voice whispered right in my ears. "I don't care about missions, just tell me where to look for his reincarnation. The soul from his past incarnation is now your main target. Good luck in the hunt." How I couldn't wait to meet him. And so I saw him in a completely new guise. Could this really be his true, original form? How beautiful he was. But the system had already forced me to make a choice, and now my face was hidden behind a mask. She agreed to get closer, but she acted so fake and clingy that I didn't feel the slightest sympathy for her, only a dull irritation. As soon as she got any closer, I started to feel downright nauseous. I swore I'd never get involved with a girl again. She's just so selfish and possessive. At least now she's finally left me alone. As I turned to leave, I cast her a parting glance and heard her resentful muttering about how unbearable and callous I was. But was there any point in being upset? Once upon a time, I had treated her exactly the same way. The system notification blinked dryly. The stars of loneliness and revenge have aligned. The system continued to mock my attempts to evoke pity, but hadn't I deserved this ending? I carefully hid my true feelings, knowing the outcome perfectly well. Now she was infinitely far from me, and the old love could never be returned. And yet, I silently vowed to protect her for the rest of my days, however many there were. Xuan Wenwen.